The room went silent. Every eye, every rank, every uniformed body froze as General Marcus Caldwell stormed forward, his polished boots clicking sharp and relentless against the conference floor. "You call this a record?" he barked, venom dripping from each word. And then, slap. His open hand met Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hart's cheek in a crisp, shocking strike that echoed through the high-ceilinged hall like a gunshot. Gasps rippled. Pens dropped. The air itself seemed to shiver. Evelyn didn't flinch. Not a twitch. Not a blink. Her jaw tightened, hands clasped neatly behind her back, eyes locked on the general, as if daring him to try again. For 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, the entire room held its breath, suspended in disbelief, unsure if silence could be this loud. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Silent Heroes. Here, we don't just tell stories, we remember the ones who acted when words failed, who let courage speak louder than rank. Today, I've got a story that proves patience, precision, and restraint can be deadlier than rage. Evelyn Hart is not just any officer. She's a Navy SEAL operative with a record that most would hesitate to even whisper about. The tension built like a storm trapped behind glass. Chairs creaked under shifting bodies. Officers straightened collars, tugged at sleeve insignias, desperate to look composed, desperate to look in control. But the air vibrated with something else, something raw, unspoken, dangerous. Hints of her past, whispers of her lethal efficiency threaded through the room. No one spoke, but everyone felt it. Even the generals, so used to commanding fear, hesitated. For a moment, they saw not a subordinate, but a force of nature, patient, cold, and waiting. Evelyn's lips barely parted. Her voice, when it finally cut through the tension, was calm, flat, almost conversational, but each word carried authority sharper than any raised voice. Today's briefing covers operational triage in contested sectors. Rules of engagement apply strictly. No assumptions, no shortcuts. Heads nodded, some reluctant, some impressed, but the general's smirks lingered. They thought this was theater. They thought they had the stage. Little did they know, the calm they mocked would be the trap. Time stretched. The subtle power radiating from Evelyn seemed to bend the very atmosphere, weighing down on everyone who underestimated her. She didn't move to retaliate. She didn't argue. She simply stood there, composed, measured. But her eyes, they burned with the memory of every mission, every kill, every calculated strike. You could see it if you knew what to look for, the suppressed storm behind the calm, the quiet promise of retribution that didn't need noise to exist. And then the first whisper of realization crossed the room. She was no ordinary officer. She was a professional whose every moment, every breath, every stance had been honed for situations exactly like this. The generals laughed lightly, a nervous chuckle, trying to reclaim dominance, but the sound felt hollow against the invisible pressure Evelyn exuded. In that split second, everyone understood. What looked like silence was anything but. It was preparation, it was control, and it was terrifying. The simulation hall was dead silent. Red-tinted infrared lights glared down from the ceiling, casting every shadow in jagged, dangerous shapes. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hart stepped into the grid, boots soft against the metallic floor, every movement deliberate. Her eyes scanned the room, the generals, the observing officers, the junior Marines lurking in the back, all thinking they understood what was coming, but they didn't. They couldn't. They had no idea the storm beneath her calm. She breathed slowly. They heard it echo in the hall. Calm, controlled, dangerous. General Caldwell smirked, nudging his colleague, General Reynolds, leaning over to whisper, "Watch this. She'll panic under pressure. Numbers like hers? Exaggeration. Performance on paper. Let's see if she cracks." They chuckled, arrogance dripping like sweat in the heat of the room. But Evelyn's eyes flicked to the floor grid, noting each panel, every shifting sensor, the layout of the fog simulants. She was calculating distance, timing, force vectors. Every muscle tensed, every nerve fired. Not a hint of doubt, not a flicker of fear. The first auditory cue sounded, a low mechanical hiss, followed by the sudden release of vapor along the hallways. Visibility dropped to a mere 6 feet. Heartbeats accelerated. Generals Caldwell and Reynolds whispered instructions to the observing captains, smirking, expecting comedy, expecting hesitation. But Evelyn moved, a step forward, then two. Her body was liquid precision, flowing from cover to cover, pivoting on calculated angles. One general raised his hand to signal mock objection, but before he could finish, her shadow crossed her peripheral vision. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't panicked, she was exact. She struck the air with authority that felt like it cut. The generals flinched, slightly, almost imperceptibly. Observers leaned in, sensing the first crack in arrogance. Evelyn's hand flicked, directing a simulated weapon away, pivoting behind her, her boots sliding softly over the polished floor as she executed a silent takedown of a training drone. The sound was minimal, just a click, a thud, but the message was deafening. She could neutralize threats without shouting, without violence, yet her presence alone controlled the room. Caldwell's smirk faltered. Reynolds' laughter died in his throat. For the first time, they felt the weight of precision, of real skill measured in controlled execution. She moved again, now faster. Sensors lit beneath her, triggering alarms designed to disorient. She danced through them, ducking, pivoting, spinning. The fog hissed, obscuring everything, but Evelyn navigated it with eyes trained for lethal awareness. She whispered commands to herself under her breath, recalibrating angles, predicting trajectories. The generals barked orders to intervening instructors, but their voices were drowned under the authority in her silence. Every movement was a sentence. Every pivot was a paragraph. The lesson was brutal and elegant. Underestimate her at your own peril. Caldwell finally raised his voice, a sharp, cracking shout. "Stop! I said stop! Do you understand we control this grid?" Evelyn paused, not in fear, but in recognition of the challenge. Her gaze met his. Her voice, barely audible, sliced through the tension. "I operate within your rules, sir, and still you cannot control me." The words weren't defiance, they were law. Every officer felt it from the floor to the ceiling. Her calm fury was a weapon sharper than any blade. The room contracted around her focus, the generals realizing silent mastery had replaced arrogance. Suddenly, she struck, not wildly, not rashly, but a controlled, devastating display. Caldwell lunged to intervene, thinking brute force would regain command. Evelyn sidestepped, elbowing with precision into his center of balance, guiding him gently but firmly to the floor. His fall cushioned, controlled, humiliating. Reynolds froze mid-step, only to find her at his side, hand steady, grip exact, leverage perfect. One subtle turn, one precise weight shift, and he collapsed without injury, but with every ounce of his pride shattered. The observers' jaws dropped. The generals could only look up, eyes wide, realizing the kill count they had mocked in the briefing was now silently enforcing itself through action. Her pace didn't relent. Every motion, every decision, every pivot screamed experience, control, lethality. The observers whispered, trying not to breathe too loud, watching the spectacle of silent dominance. She moved through fog, sensors, simulated obstacles, and each time the generals attempted to intervene, they were redirected, not violently, but with undeniable authority. By the midpoint of the drill, their laughter had completely evaporated. The room itself seemed to bend to Evelyn's rhythm. Every officer, every observer, every general was trapped in the truth of her capability. Underestimated, mocked, now undeniable. Evelyn stopped mid-hallway, standing over the final training panel. Her breathing remained measured. Sweat gleamed faintly on her brow, but her eyes held a storm contained. The generals sat, humiliated not by failure, but by awareness of a force they had never truly acknowledged. The lesson wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was silent, devastating, psychological. The kill count wasn't a number anymore, it was proof, and everyone in that room, from observers to the highest-ranking officials, felt the quiet weight of truth pressing down like iron. Every eye followed her as she pivoted once more, surveying the aftermath of the tactical demonstration. Observers exchanged glances, whispers passing through the room like tiny tremors. She had not only bested the generals, but she had dismantled their assumptions, eroded their authority, and imposed a psychological discipline so profound that even the most seasoned officers felt their control slipping. Each subtle detail, the infrared tracking, the fog, the tactical gear, her unwavering composure, told the story. Underestimating her was the gravest mistake of their careers. The general scrambled, trying to regain composure, but Evelyn was already anticipating every move. Infrared sensors lit up her path, but she didn't hesitate. Each step was deliberate, calculated, fluid. The fog hissed and curled around her like smoke in a battlefield, yet she moved as though it were sunlight, clear, unrelenting, precise. Every officer in the room felt the invisible grip of her command, the way silence could dominate more fiercely than shouted orders ever could. "Do not move!" Caldwell's voice cracked, more desperation than authority. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward him, just a fraction, just enough to convey awareness. And then she pivoted, a controlled slide, her gloved hands adjusting the balance of a nearby obstacle, and the general's momentum was his own undoing. He stumbled, righted himself with effort, only to realize he had calculated every inch of his motion before he even committed. The smirk he had worn all morning was gone, replaced by the faintest flicker of fear. Reynolds attempted a step forward, thinking numbers on paper could protect him in physical space. Evelyn intercepted, not with brute strength, but with exact leverage. One elbow, one pivot, one gentle but irreversible nudge, and he was guided to the floor, a controlled fall that left the room gasping. The observers froze. Some clutched their chairs. No one spoke, no one laughed. The lesson was written in the silent choreography of power. Underestimate her and you lose, not just physically, but psychologically. Her breathing remained calm. The air in the hall seemed to tighten around her with each movement, fog swirling like a living entity. The generals whispered instructions, but their voices were swallowed by the weight of her presence. Every subtle motion, foot placement, wrist angle, line of sight was a paragraph in a story of domination. Each calculated step whispered a warning. She was patient, precise, lethal. The kill count they had mocked became more than numbers. It became proof, undeniable in motion, undeniable in silence. A sudden hiss of pneumatic panels shifted the layout again. Obstacles rose and fell, simulating a combat zone, but Evelyn anticipated each alteration. Her hand flicked toward a panel, redirecting it, guiding its motion to her advantage. Caldwell lunged, thinking sheer aggression could compensate, but Evelyn's grip was like a vice. A swift, silent maneuver, and he was off balance, forced to kneel, the absurdity of his arrogance stark against the precise choreography of her mastery. Reynolds froze, calculating, realizing the same rules applied. The observers whispered, their breath barely audible over the faint hum of infrared lights. Evelyn's voice, calm yet sharp, sliced through the room. Rules apply, no improvisation outside the protocol. It wasn't a warning, it was law. Every officer knew she could have escalated, could have shattered the generals completely, but she restrained herself, demonstrating dominance through control rather than chaos. The silent fury in her eyes sent shivers through the high-ranking officers. Their laughter had long dissolved into unease. And then, her final pivot. In a swift, almost imperceptible motion, she redirected Reynolds' momentum, guiding him gently but firmly to the far edge of the simulation grid. The room fell into complete silence. Every officer, every observer, every general realized the brutal clarity of her capability. No chaos, no anger, just skill, precision, and undeniable proof. The kill count wasn't just numbers anymore. It was living evidence, unfolding in real time before their incredulous eyes. The fog thickened, swirling around Evelyn like living smoke, but she moved as if it were nothing, each step silent, deliberate, inevitable. Caldwell tried to regain his footing, swinging an arm in frustration, but Evelyn anticipated the motion. She ducked, pivoted, and guided his momentum with a single subtle elbow. He fell again, this time landing with a soft thud that seemed impossible for someone of his rank and size. The observers' breaths caught collectively. Even seasoned officers were speechless. Reynolds' face turned pale, his smirk replaced by calculation and unease. He advanced cautiously, but Evelyn's shadow already blocked his path. She stepped aside, shifted weight, and with a single silent nudge, redirected him to the edge of a raised panel. He stumbled, arms flailing for control, and collapsed, powerless against the invisible choreography that controlled every inch of his movement. Every observer felt it. Authority, when wielded correctly, did not require shouting. It demanded obedience, silently extracted through competence. The generals attempted to rally, to reassert control, but Evelyn's calm mastery was overwhelming. She circled the room, each motion precise, each turn calculated, her eyes flicking from one officer to another like laser focus. A whispered command here, a subtle hand signal there, and the generals realized they had no leverage. The kill count they had mocked in the briefing was no longer a statistic. It was living, moving, undeniable proof. Every pivot, every silent maneuver was testimony, a living demonstration of skill and discipline. Suddenly, a new obstacle shifted. Panels rose and fell with mechanical precision. Evelyn adapted instantly, using her body to redirect force, absorb momentum, and maintain complete control of the environment. Caldwell lunged, a desperate act, but Evelyn intercepted flawlessly, guiding him to kneel without striking him aggressively. Reynolds froze, realizing the futility of any physical challenge. The young observers held their breaths, watching as a living legend unfolded before them. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, calm yet commanding. Rules apply. Stick to protocol. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. The generals understood immediately. Any deviation would only highlight their incompetence. Her calm fury was more terrifying than any scream. The room vibrated with a pension of power that did not need to declare itself. Every officer felt it. Every junior Marine felt it. Even the seasoned generals felt the weight of silent authority pressing down like iron. Finally, Evelyn moved to her last maneuver. In a fluid motion, she redirected Reynolds' momentum completely, forcing him to the far edge of the grid. Caldwell's attempt to intervene failed spectacularly. Every shift, every step, every movement she had predicted and countered. The room was frozen in awe. The drill was supposed to test reflexes. The generals had believed it was theater. Instead, it was a revelation. Evelyn Hart turned silence into dominance, mockery into proof, and arrogance into submission without ever raising her voice. The aftermath was visible in the generals' faces. Caldwell's jaw tightened. Reynolds' eyes darted nervously. The observers whispered, glancing at one another in disbelief. Evelyn's kill count, once dismissed as exaggeration, now spoke louder than words ever could. Precision, patience, endurance, and silent fury had rewritten the room. Every detail, the fog, the sensors, the infrared grids, her tactical mastery, was proof. The lesson was clear, brutal, and unforgettable. Underestimate her, and you lose, utterly, psychologically, and permanently. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the administrative blocks of Quantico when Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hart returned to her quarters. The air was still, almost reverent, as if the building itself acknowledged the shift in balance. The generals, Caldwell and Reynolds, had left the simulation hall not with threats or commands, but with silent resignation etched into their expressions. Every officer who had observed the tactical display carried an unspoken awareness. This was not a defeat of violence, but a demonstration of methodical, undeniable authority. Evelyn's steps were quiet, measured. She removed her tactical gloves and placed them neatly on the table, as if laying down evidence rather than tools of war. The observers' reactions had already circulated throughout the base. Whispers of awe, disbelief, and subtle fear mingled with professional respect. The kill count they had mocked, the record that had seemed like bragging, now radiated clarity. Every action she had taken during the simulation was documented, time-stamped, and cross-verified. The record didn't lie. The record spoke for her, and it was unstoppable. Across the hall, the generals convened privately, their conversation low, tense. "I didn't see it coming," Caldwell muttered, voice tight with frustration. She didn't even shout. She didn't need to. Every move, every decision, perfect. Reynolds' jaw clenched. We underestimated her. Our mockery, our arrogance, it's all on record. We crossed the line. Their careers, their authority, had been silently dismantled, not by vengeance, but by procedure. Every action she had taken fell within operational regulations, every maneuver validated under Tier 4 clearance. Justice had been served quietly, methodically, but it was final. The administrative office began to hum with verification protocols. Every simulation recording, every infrared feed, every tactical decision was logged and sealed. Evelyn's report, submitted with precise annotations, detailed each neutralization, each calculated movement. The officials reviewing the data nodded in quiet appreciation, recognizing a rare blend of skill, patience, and ethical compliance. The general's previous mockery, their public disdain, now contrasted sharply with her silent procedural victory. It wasn't revenge, they hadn't been punished out of anger, but justice through diligence, skill, and adherence to rules. Later, Evelyn walked the perimeter fence alone, her uniform replaced by standard PT gear. The wind brushed across her face, a reminder that the outside world remained unaware of the internal shifts. Yet within the system, within the record, nothing could undo the clarity of what had transpired. Every officer involved would remember this day. Not the slap, not the momentary chaos, but the immutable truth. Underestimation of skill, precision, and ethical mastery had permanent consequences. The system had vindicated her, proving that silent, methodical action could outweigh brash authority. The generals were quietly reassigned, removed from inter-service command participation, their reputations internally marked. Observers whispered about the layers of accountability that had unfolded. Every movement, every tactical choice, every ethical adherence had been documented, leaving no room for dispute. Evelyn's silence, once misread as passivity, now resonated as power. Her victory was not flamboyant, it did not require applause or recognition, yet it was indelibly engraved in the record, in the memories of those who had witnessed, and in the protocols that had been flawlessly executed. As she filed the final acknowledgement form, Evelyn paused. No triumph shouted from the rooftops, no vindictive smile, only a quiet acknowledgement. Justice was not about spectacle. It was about procedure, record, and impeccable execution. Her fingers hovered over the pen before placing the form down. The echoes of the simulation lingered, not as noise, but as a testament, a lesson in patience, in control, in methodical, undeniable authority. And the audience, if they could witness such a story, would understand that true power is often silent, precise, and recorded. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Silent Heroes. If my work has inspired you, please subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Remember, power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, deliberate, and documented. Sometimes it speaks so clearly through action and record that even the highest authority cannot deny it. That's the lesson of Evelyn Hart, and the record doesn't lie. By the end of the day, the hallways of Quantico returned to routine, but the ripple of that silent, precise victory remained. Officers whispered about the methods, the adherence to regulations, the calm, lethal authority that had transformed what could have been humiliation into a permanent lesson. Generals who had mocked and doubted her would never forget the quiet efficiency that had dismantled their arrogance. The ethical and procedural victory was complete, leaving a legacy that was both shocking and inspiring. Every officer who reviewed the simulation, every junior Marine who had watched in awe, and every official who logged the record would carry it with them for the rest of their careers. Evelyn Hart had proven that patience, skill, and methodical execution were more powerful than rank or loud authority. The kill count, once ridiculed, now existed as silent testimony, and in every recorded detail, in every timestamp, in every verified action lay the proof: real power is patient, real authority is silent, real justice is documented.